Hey, hey, hey. So today I just want to talk about domestic violence. I think it's just a topic that isn't talked about enough. And here's why I think that. So I am a 17-year domestic violence survivor. I actually got out of the cycle in 2009 after 17 years of different relationships that were in that cycle. And so, having that experience, I learned so much about the system and about myself, about my children, about what other people experience. Like, wow, what an eye opener. So, the first time that I um, became a part of that cycle actually started in my childhood. I know that sounds so crazy, right? Because how can that start in my childhood? Well, my mom was an alcoholic until I was 5 years old. And she wasn't just an average alcoholic or drunk. She actually had a lot of anger and she had her own demons that she was fighting. And I praise God every day that she got sober and she's sober today. And she's just a completely different woman today. Um, But I witnessed that at a very young age. And there were like times as a child where I remember my uncle would hide. We would go in the kitchen when we knew my dad was going to the bar to go get my mom. We would go into the kitchen and we would grab out the silverware drawers that had all the sharp knives and all the forks and spoons, like all the dishes, like the silverware, the sharp objects. And we would hide them underneath mine and my sister's bunk bed. And I had the lower bunk. So it was like right under my bed. And I just always had that fear that like one day she might find it where we're hiding those things. And so as a little kid, imagine being 2 and 3 years old and you're playing in like a fort with blankets and all around the bottom bunk. And you're being told like all these fun stories to try to distract you. But internally, like all that stuff is under your bed, and you know you're hiding it from your mom, who is drunk. And you don't really know what drunk means. You just know she's going to be mean when she comes home and angry. And so I would hear my parents fighting and I would hear them arguing, and I couldn't fix it, and I didn't know like that you could even fix that. It was so crazy because it took a really involved incident for my mom to finally sober up. And it was like night and day. I don't know how to explain it, but she literally one day she was drinking at a bar, and the next minute she was ordering a diet soda. Um, I remember playing t-ball and baseball, and after every single game, I started playing at 3 years old. And for the first 2 years, after every game, we would go get, a bag of chips. We would play the tabletop arcade games, and my mom would grab a drink. And we would stay until my dad would close his business down. He had a tire shop next door to a bar at one point when I was little. And so she would shut it down and he would shut it down. And us kids would be chilling there and we'd get our burgers and our fries and like, oh, we were taken care of, but we were definitely in that environment. And so then my mom sobered up and she would say no, but she would still go in and see her friends and still go in and see people. And I really thought that was always very courageous of her. She could put herself in a room and still have the willpower to say no to the alcohol. And so I, as a little kid, witnessed those things. But after my mom got sober, I felt like our lives got better. And my parents, fought less. My dad stuck through with her through it. They lost their daughter. I lost my sister in a house fire by the time I was 9 and she was 11. And so we went through all these different stages where my mom could have easily relapsed, but instead she stayed the course and stayed sober. And so um, I was still in situations in my childhood that placed me in danger. and put me in environments, whether it was at a family member's house or a friend's house. Um, I feel like there wasn't a lot of censorship in the environment. And so I thought that a lot of ways that women specifically were treated, and men, not just, I'm not isolating, but I witnessed a lot of people being hit or hurt or being beaten on or slapped around. I personally experienced that and became a victim to some of those people in the line of fire or standing up for somebody else as a little kid. I really had headstrong goals and self-worth, and I stood up for everybody else but myself. Right. And so there's just a lot of interesting things that led to looking back and seeing why I got into the relationships that I did. I am so grateful for the babies I got out of it. First and foremost, I have no regrets. Every life experience has taught me something, right? There's always a lesson and always a blessing. And so the first relationship, I was very young, became a teen mom. Um, wasn't ready, obviously. Who's ready to be a mom at 14 and a half, 15, right? You're just not. But I also knew I had responsibilities and I made choices. And so I personally, for me personally, I couldn't think of the idea of having an abortion. Um, and so I just felt like this was my opportunity that God had given me to have my dad have a relationship with one of my kids. I had an older father in his 50s, and it really always bothered me that being the baby of 14, that my dad wasn't going to be able to have those kinds of relationships like I watched my other nieces and nephews have. And he was just such a good dad that I wanted my kids to be able to have that too. And so when I had Megan, she, her and my dad became best friends. They had 5 acres in Northern California up in the mountains, and she would just run up there with my dad and the animals. And she had a potbelly pig. We ended up with 2 of them, and you know what I mean? And so there were some good things. But there was also a lot of things that I didn't know. I didn't know that family members, including my spouse, was using methamphetamines at one point. I didn't know there was a bunch of that activity going on around me. And for a while, my parents and I were like the only sober adults, I realized at one point. And I went, holy crap, right? And I didn't realize this until years later, after I sobered up, after all of out of the cycle. But I look back now and you can see the red flags, but I just never noticed them. Okay. And um, it's so crazy because when you want to see the good after seeing so much turmoil, you try not to see the bad in things, and you don't notice things that aren't good for you because you're so used to seeing them that it just seems like a normalcy for you and it's no big deal. Um, I actually had one of my family members tell me one day after an argument, oh, it's no big deal. And I said, yes, it is. I don't want to fight with people. I don't want to argue like that. I want to have better communication skills, right? And so we're so used to this environment that we just accept it. And that's what was happening for me at a very young age. I accepted these things in my environment because I didn't think I could fix them or control them or change them. But what I didn't realize was that I actually had that power if I wanted it. Is that willpower, if you want to put a word to it. And I didn't realize I had that. And I didn't realize that I could have the courage to say no to things. And at a very young age, alcohol became a vice, the very, very young age. And because it was introduced into my environment at a very young age, it became a numbing tool at a very young age. And so by the time I was 12 years old, I was a full-blown alcoholic. And I really didn't want to be alive, if I'm being transparent. I was struggling with anxiety in every area of my life, with depression, with self-image issues. After losing my sister when I was 9 years old and not getting any kind of resourceful help whatsoever to cope with it, I went into this cycle of just self-harm and shoplifting, throwing massive rager parties at like 11 and 12 years old. My parents didn't know any of this. Sorry, mom. Um, and, just really, really, really struggling on the inside with trying to have like identity of who am I? Like I was always compared to my older sister who died. We looked a lot alike. We looked like twins, even though we were 2 years apart. And, I was always just bigger kid. So I always looked, like I was her twin. And then after she died, a lot of people still said those things. And so I had this really big identity of like, now my sister's dead. Like here I'm alive. At survivor's guilt. I couldn't understand these things and I couldn't wrap my head around it. I didn't have anybody who understood it around me. And so um, I just wanted to feel loved, be loved. I being molested from 3 to 7 years old by three separate family members on top of my sister dying. I had all of these feelings and emotions that I wasn't allowed to talk about, that I was scared to talk about, that I didn't know who to even say anything to. Y'all, I wasn't in my 40s when I first spoke out about this. I'm 45 now. And it was so hard on in every I can say in every area of my life. It ruined relationships. It created very unhealthy relationships. My first divorce, I was 19 and a half when I left my partner after 5.5 years. And my that was my first daughter's dad. We're friends today. I thank God we're friends today. We co-parented. She was about 4 years old when we divorced, and it was my choice. I realized that I was growing up in areas of my life, and I met this man when I was still a child, and I was growing up, and I was going on to become a teacher and to follow my dreams and my careers, and he was trying to really hold me back because we were not on the same level anymore. We weren't in the same areas of our life, and I think he wanted somebody more at home and, like a stay-at-home wife. And I was young and had life to explore still. And so, Megan, it was always about her. And so we just really just learned to co-parent. And I had to teach him a lot of that. We struggled in the beginning, but now she's almost 30. And so she's a mama now herself, and she's just incredible. And she broke the cycle. She broke those generational curses we talk about. And so she did not become a teen mom. And then she was so proud of herself. And I was just so proud of her for all the things she chose to become. And she chose to not do like I did. You know what I mean? She chose to not allow the fears to hold her back. And it blew my mind because even through that cycle, in the beginning of those cycles, I watched her grow and change. And so I divorced her dad at 19 and a half. Um, and then so half a year later, I met my next partner. And I tried to date a couple people here and there, and it just didn't work. I just wasn't ready to settle down. And then along came my next partner, and I thought it would be different. I truly thought it would be a different relationship. He swept me off my feet. I didn't realize that I that I had my own flags that people look for when they're looking for their next person, their next target. And I had a target on my back. And I say that in the nicest way possible, but I had a target on my back that said she's insecure, she's vulnerable, and she just wants to be loved. And that was truly what it was. I was insecure. I didn't think that I could be loved ever, especially, as a teen mom. I was told all these horrible things by people just for getting pregnant. And it really messed with my mindset. And then just mentally, I had a lot of mental struggles and abuse in the last relationship. Just a lot of it just mentally drained me. And I hadn't dealt with any of my trauma. So here I was, 20 years old, and getting to go through my first divorce, haven't dealt with any of my childhood trauma, blacked it all out. And then it all came flooding back when I was looking through photo albums with my brother. And then I met this new man, and I thought he would change my world. And we were both young and dumb and foolish, just like most people are, in their early 20s. And, um, it's kind of one of those quick relationships where he just kind of swept me off my feet. And um, we ended up pregnant a few months after dating. And, I love my babies. I am so grateful for them. I will never, ever deny that there's always a purpose and there's no accidents, right? I don't believe in accidents or coincidences. It's all God. And I just, I learned a lot of lessons and had a lot of blessings in that relationship. Um, I didn't realize that a negative, aggressive behaviors were not good. Um, Attitude is everything. And I know that now today, but then I didn't know that. And it's amazing what you learn over time that really shows you in areas where you still need to grow or shows you areas where you have grown. And to be able to just sit back and assess them and be so appreciative for the experiences, even if they weren't the greatest. In that 9 years, 8 months relationship, there was a lot of violence. I'm not going to go into detail, but there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of me stopping him from hurting other people. There was a lot of things that I didn't know happened to my kids while I was at work. There was a lot of things that we argued over that I look back today and they were the dumbest things. But there was also a lot of affairs. There was a lot of tension. There was a lot of debt and financial struggles. There was a lot of addictions and alcohol involved. Um, when they talk about the cycle and they talk about patterns and behaviors, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. There's usually a pattern and a behavior to narcissistic people or to people who are in addiction or are in the cycle. And a lot of the times we don't recognize it when we're in it. It's only until after we are completely out of it and we're not repeating the same habits and we're actually breaking the cycle that we actually see where those red flags are at. And that's what had to happen for me. It almost cost me my life. And I say that with so much unconditional love for myself and for someone else. If you're going through that or you're in that right now or somebody, it's really easy to say, why did you stay so long? Why did you not leave? You knew these things or you figured these things out. What made you stay? I went through what's called Stockholm syndrome. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's basically when you're going through something traumatic, you tend to protect the situation or the person. And that was me. That was my kids. I watched growing up, my dad put up with quite a bit of things with my mom. And I'm so grateful that they made it and wavered the course and they were able to heal things and work things out, but it didn't teach me how to do that. And that's the part where it fell short for me, was how to problem solve and how to be resourceful and how to get yourself out of those situations when they're not good or safe or they're not healthy. And for me, I really thought, man, I screwed this one up. I already divorced once. I don't want to have to divorce again. I mean, this was real truth for me. Here I was almost 30 years old. I should have my crop together. Maybe it's not as bad as it seems. And I went through these whole emotions and emotions and emotions months before I almost died. Months before. I was processing and trying to choose to leave almost a year before I finally left. But what took so long and why I moved my kids and I almost 3,000 miles away to be supportive and to try to work things out was because I truly believed in loving people and seeing the good. And I was truly trying to do and love like Jesus. And I was truly trying to be a good wife and a good mom and a good person. And deep down, I was just trying to be a fixer. I was trying to fix the situation instead of letting God do what was right for it. And I didn't want to give up, right? I didn't want to quit. I'd quit on so many things, and so many things just went disastrous that I wasn't seeing that these things were patterns. I wasn't seeing that these things were red flags. And I was just like, finally, I just, if you can't beat them, join them. So I just started getting drunk more. That doesn't solve anything. Okay. And so what changed was I almost died. Um, in the middle of the fighting, I was being choked and was going in and out of consciousness. And I thought to myself instantly, my children are going to open their eyes tomorrow morning. The sun's going to come up and they're going to find their mother dead on her bed. And it really is a hard pill to swallow. And in that moment, I've talked about it in another podcast. In that moment, realized the predicament that I was in. And I asked God for help in that moment. And I smelled my dead father's Old Spice cologne. And I felt somebody very strong, like my dad, grab my right shoulder and literally pulled me on top of my spouse. And I began choking the life out of him. And it was in that moment when I realized that I had two choices. In that moment, I had two choices, only two. The first one was I could allow him to turn me into the monster that he'd become. Or the second one was that I could wash my hands of it all right then and there and tell him I want a divorce, wipe my hands like this, and walk out of that room with some dignity. I chose number two. I stopped choking him. I told him I wouldn't allow him to turn me into the monster he'd become, and I want a divorce. And I washed my hands and I walked out of that bedroom with my head held high, knowing that I did the right thing for my kids and for myself. And I was going to live. I wasn't going to let him take my life. And in that moment, I took my life back from every moment that I'd ever thought I'd lost it. And I was just getting ready to turn 30. And my whole world was turning upside down. But I knew who I was. And I knew that God took care of it. And I struggled because I had to admit that I was a domestic violence victim. And that was hard. That was hard. That wasn't easy. That was one of the hardest things to chew and eat and swallow. Walking into the children's school and having the social worker come to your house and the police and having them interview your kids and ask them all these questions while you stand outside on the porch, praying that you were a good mom, enough for your kids to see that you tried your best, and just praying that they didn't get hurt in the process, and then finding out that they did, and just OMG, like it just tore me up as a mom, as a parent, as a person. And I was helpless in that moment. I was beyond my control. And I took all the weight of that shame and that guilt and wore it like a badge for a really long time, put a mask on. People didn't believe my story. People didn't believe it could happen. People didn't believe that that was the truth. And they made me out to be this horrible human being and the things that people will say to you. And it was so hard to walk in that season of getting out, showing up to a domestic violence class with a group of other victims, survivors, people, and watching some of them today still be in the cycle, watching some of them today still battling, knowing that this was in 2009, 2010. Do you see? And like watching and seeing that I got out. I was one, and my kids and I, we were the fortunate ones. We got out. Not everybody gets out. Not everybody survives this. And my life is still not open like most people's lives are today. I still have that person looking for me around every freaking corner. I still have to have my head on a swivel. But what I will tell you is I don't let it bother me like it used to. It used to give me panic attacks. It set me into a deep, deep depression. At one point, I just wanted to just end it because I couldn't handle the pain anymore, the suffering. What changed? How did I get to where I am today? To where I can talk about it, to where I can share it, to where I can offer some light to it. The truth is I had to learn to share my true story, and I had to own my shit. I had to own what I could have done differently with the situation at hand and the things that I could have changed, even though they didn't change in that situation. I could rewrite the story in my head, in my heart, in my truth. I can make it to where my future does not look like my past. And I really just had to do a lot of self-development. I had to do a lot of letting go. I've had to do a lot of inner work on myself, on me. I had to stop focusing on those people who hurt me, send them unconditional love as hard as it was, forgive them. Even if I didn't get an apology, there's apologies I'll never get in my lifetime. And that's okay. I'm okay with that today. I wasn't for a long time. For a long time, I was pretty pissed off, pretty angry, pretty bitter. But I realized that I was the one getting poisoned. Those people weren't getting the poison. I was the one ingesting the poison every time I was behaving like that. So my attitude had to change. I had to go from being bitter to better. I had to realize that I had children that I was fighting for. I had children that were expecting me to show up as the only parent they had for a while. Until Sean came in the picture, I was the only thing they had. That was it. Just me. And that was heavy. And I was drinking, I was an alcoholic, and I was struggling, and I was trying to battle my own demons while trying to take care of my kids' demons, while trying to get them into counseling, while trying to help them wrap their head around why they couldn't see their dad, why trying to explain why I was, having to take and rip our family apart, and OMG, and having them live with the nightmares and the PTSD and the terrors and the trauma because they black stuff out just like I did when I was younger. Like there was so much, and it was so heavy because if you don't understand domestic violence, you don't understand, especially if you have kids involved, it's never just about you. It's never just about you. It's all of you. You're grieving the loss of somebody that's still living. You're grieving a life you thought you were going to have forever. You're grieving what you wanted it to look like. There's so much negative toxicity that pours out when you're healing. And if you're not willing to let it go, it will stay and consume you like poison. And so for me, for a while, I let it consume me like poison. I was pretty bitter, especially after I got injured. And I couldn't do the things I loved that helped me heal from those negative things and help me be a good, healthy outlet. I couldn't do those things anymore. And I didn't know what I could do. And so I didn't know what I was capable of. I didn't know what my limits or not. I thought I was limited, really. And I'm limitless. We're all limitless. And I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that we could literally do all kinds of things. And there's such a variety of things that we can do to heal from things like this, but we have to be willing to open to explore those things. And for me, I was stuck in this little box because that's what I'd only known for so many years. Because if I stepped outside the box, I had judgment and criticism, or I just didn't like confrontation. I had been built up so much after the first divorce and had gained all this confidence in college and teaching. And the second divorce just wiped me out. If I'm being transparent, I went from being mentally drained to building that up to bam, right? It was double the time of in this situation. And this time it became physical and it became, different kinds of abuse. There's a multitude of abuse that happened in that relationship that, um, today I'm grateful I'm alive. Today I'm grateful I am a loving human being and I just operate at a whole different person, a whole different level. Because I didn't see that for myself. If I'm being transparent, I never expected to be the woman I am today. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have told you were crazy that I would be doing something like this, that I would be talking about my story this way, that I'd be writing a book right now, that I'd be sharing how I overcome these obstacles with people in hopes to just help one person. And so just being transparent, you never know what's on the other side, but you got to go after it. And so for me, leaving that second relationship, I swore off relationships. I said my picker was broken and I couldn't pick anybody else. And I was really scared that I would get in the cycle again. But what I didn't realize and recognize until after Sean and I started dating, um, and it was 3.5 years after my, separation. After Sean and I started dating, I was a different person. I made some commitments to the Lord that I was going to work on being a better me, and I really started being a better person. And then He came into my life, and um, they really are right. I've heard so many different people say that when you start changing your attitude and you start working on yourself is when things really start happening for you. That's really what I witnessed in my life now that I look back. Once I decided that I didn't want to remain in that cycle anymore and that I wouldn't settle for behaviors that go along with that environment and that cycle, I started losing a lot of people in my life. A lot of people I thought would be in my life forever. All of a sudden, I wasn't tolerating their crap anymore. And I know that's just very transparent, but it's true. And even today, I feel like last year and this year, I've done a really big job at just detoxing people from my life and choosing better. If they don't want to choose better, that's fine. That's their choice. It's their life. But I can't settle for it being in my circle, in my environment anymore. I protect my energy. My energy is so much higher today. I vibrate at a different level. I do a lot of mindset work today. I do a lot of meditating, a lot of just working on my mindset. I hired a life coach last year. There's just been a lot of changes that I decided I was going to do for me because I always put myself last. If you've ever been in this cycle, you'll know you put yourself last. Um, you don't think you're worthy of being put first. And truthfully, I used to think it was selfish. And I was told by my ex-partners that it was very selfish of me for wanting to do self-care. Very selfish of me for wanting to get healthier and work on myself and want to feel pretty, feel confident, feel good, and love myself. It was very selfish. And that's false. I'm here to tell you that without working on yourself, you're no good to anybody else. And so for me, I learned that self-care was pivotal. It was crucial. And I didn't really start doing that until, the last year or so. I used to grind, and workaholic and just really just felt like I had to throw myself into everything and fix everyone. And what I realized is that I can only control me. And getting out of the cycle, when you get out of the cycle of abuse, you're so used to being a people pleaser. You're so used to pleasing your abusers and sometimes even their family and like the toxic family members. And you step on eggshells. You're literally on eggshells and you just feel like if you hit that wrong eggshell the wrong way and it makes just the wrong noise, all hell's going to break loose. And so you're constantly living with this anxious feeling like you're going to just blow everything up and then it's going to be a fight and then it's just going to be hell, right? And I lived with that emotions and those feelings for so many decades, walking on eggshells in my life, that I was never the person who was writing my own story. I wasn't the main character in my story. I was I was not playing the leading role. I was just kind of there, and everybody else was telling me what I should and shouldn't do. And it was the moment that I made the decision to do something for myself was when the things started changing and improving. And it felt so invigorating and very uncomfortable at first, because I did have those feelings of doubt and guilt and shame. And then I realized that I was the model for my kids. And I had a friend of mine say to me several years before I even made the connection. And he said, "Do you realize that your behaviors and what you're saying and doing is literally showing your kids like who they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to do, and who they're supposed to become?" And I said, "No, it's not true." He said, "Yeah, the mom is such a significant role model for her kids that, like, out of every person in the world, they're going to really look at their mom." And I realized that I made some mistakes and I wasn't doing my best. And so I feel like my older kids didn't get the best of me, of my motherhood. And I think we can all relate to that, because when we're new and we're just not perfect and we're learning as we go, we get better. It's just like wine. We get better with age, right? We get better with time. And I realized that I couldn't hold that guilt and that shame anymore. And that if my older kids could, at some point forgive me for not knowing any better. That's really what it was I just didn't know any better. No one had taught me better. And so once I started becoming resourceful and taking classes and learning about things and showing up more, getting sober, like these things changed my world. And then it changed my kids' world. It changed my grandkids' world, my nieces and my nephews' world. Like it changes your life, it changes the people around you, and you can get out of the cycle. It's never too late. It's never too late. And don't worry about the criticism or what other people think. You being alive is what's important. Don't worry about the clothes. Don't worry about the furniture. Don't worry about the house or the home or the vehicles or nothing. All you worry about is getting you and your family to safety, being safe, and get out. Get out. And I know that that's going to hurt people to have to come to that truth. But if it's not healthy, it's not healthy. Ask yourself a couple of pivotal questions, and don't be ashamed to answer them truthfully. Are you happy? And if the answer is no, why not? Do you know why you're not happy? Is there something going on in your environment that's just not safe, and deep down you know it's not safe, or it's not healthy for you and you know it's not healthy? If there's something in your environment that's just not what you want, change it. What I love when somebody said to me after being out of the cycle for a while, somebody said to me, "You're not a tree. You can get up and you can move and change it. You're not a tree." And for me, that was a really pivotal thing to learn and to grow and to adapt to remind myself that I can choose where I put my roots. I get to decide where I plant myself and where I plant my roots. And if I don't like it, I can change it. If I don't like it, I can equip myself to change that. And so we're going to talk more about how that can come into fold and how you can change things. And once you're out, what now? So many people don't know what to do once they're out of the cycle, that they end up right back in the cycle. And so save that for another episode. Stay tuned. We are going to talk a little bit more about that. I do want to offer you open resources just to make sure that you know, like, where you can find things, what's available. Like, you would be amazed at where you can find the resources and like how you can find them, and they're literally at your fingertips. But so many people don't realize what they can do. I have talked to so many men and women who didn't even know how to Google. And that's going to sound crazy to some of you listening to this, but I have helped so many people get out of the cycle and file their divorce papers and get into safe locations, like all these different things over the years. And the stories I have heard, it's mind blowing to me today still that people don't realize where their resources are. So I'm going to put that together so that those are available with the podcast. And so I look forward to just being a supportive person. Just know that it's never too late. And your decision day is right now. And just know that until you choose better, your life will stay the same. I love you all. I hope this has helped, and just know I'm praying for you.